I mean, nobody was selling snowboards back then yet, anywhere. And we still got the catalog, and it's like, okay, the thing looks like that, then okay, we'll make it. And we just made it out of plywood and started riding all kinds of local little hills. Like I've had an experience where I was certain that if I get one more wave in my head, I'm not gonna make it and I will drown and die. And that wasn't so much fun, but still a good experience, of course, because I made it through luckily. I think it's a difficult game to play, to be in the mountains in risky terrain, because you need to be able to focus, and then you also need to be able to unfocus and have a broader view about stuff, because if you really just focused all the time, you miss the big picture. And I think it's mostly about the big picture, but also about the details. So it's a difficult sport in that respect. Yeah. Nomadic lifestyle, going from another place to another one when the seasons change, much in the same ways as nomadic people used to do back in the day, changing from summer pastures to winter pastures and so forth. It's definitely part of the thing, you know, people get killed, so you kind of have to accept it. If you're not accepting it, you are in denial, and if you are in denial, you don't have the whole picture in your head, and you're bound to get into troubles for sure.
I am Tommy and this is Surfer of Life. Today's guest is Jarkko-Juhani Henttonen, a true pioneer of freeride riding in Finland, and an author and a publisher of a book called Freeride. You are a work lifestyler and a life enthusiastic. Jarkko, welcome to Surfer of Life.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I was checking out your background and kind of like thinking about this Surfer of Life, and then I was checking out you. It kind of fits you very well, if I'm correct. Could you consider yourself as a sort of a lifestyle surfer, doing a lot of things in your life?
I wouldn't probably say lifestyle, I would say way of life. It's maybe a little bit different, sort of a broader term, but yeah, I guess this definition probably would fit me quite well.
About your way of living, could you describe me about that? How would you say about your way of living?
Well, ever since I got out of high school, I've been kind of traveling quite a bit, going from place to place seasonally, leading sort of a, like, I would suppose I could say a nomadic lifestyle, going from another place to another one when the seasons change, much in the same ways as nomadic people used to do back in the day, changing from summer pastures to winter pastures and so forth. I've mainly spent time in Europe. I used to spend my winters in France in the 90s, and since about 10-15 years ago I kind of switched a little bit and have been mainly staying in the Nordic countries and traveling back and forth between southern Finland and northern Scandinavia.
You've been doing a lot of different works. I checked out on that. Is there any really bizarre work you've done throughout your working career?
Well, I don't know if it's bizarre, but probably a little bit unusual. I was art model, like modeling for art students, basically nude. Probably more than 2 years altogether in Lahden Muotoiluinstituutti, the Design Institute of Lahti, Arts Institute of Lahti, Vapaa Taidekoulu in Helsinki, and the Academy of Fine Arts for two fall seasons. So yeah, that's kind of bizarre, I would guess. But back in the 90s when I was doing it, was really well-paid job, and since it didn't require any sort of an education, it was really easy to get into. And it was also, I mean, yeah, most definitely it's, in a sense, it's the most boring job you can get because you don't do anything. You just sit or stand or lay over there motionless, basically. Absolutely, you have to not do anything. And yeah, some of those sessions are quite long and it's pretty boring, but in a sense it's also really interesting or enlightening, I would say. I got to listen to really good high standard, high quality artists teach the students and learned a whole lot about art through that. So it was interesting too. But yeah, that's probably the most unusual job I've had.
Sounds quite interesting. How is it, because you need to stand or sit very still, right?
Yeah.
How was your like mentality? How you're able to focus to stay in the still position the whole time?
Well, depending on the position, it can actually be pretty painful. But normally it goes so that you stand or sit or you are in your pose for 20 minutes, then you have a 10-minute break. And this goes on for like 3 hours, then you have a lunch break and then another session in the afternoon. So it's like, how much is it? It's like 2-3 hours of posing a day, motionless. And you know, you get kind of numb and stuff, so you have to have a sort of a very patient mindset to be able to do it and come up with stuff, because of course your mind starts racing about some stuff and whatever, and yeah, it can get boring, but just focus on the thing and try not to move or not move too much. Obviously you have to shake your arms and legs a little bit every so often to not to get too numb or too painful, but yeah, it's a bit difficult. It's not something that everybody could do, I would say.
You think this has been helpful when we're going to talk a lot about your riding, freeride riding and all other things, that you think that was already helpful for you to stay focused up in the mountains or whatever you do, when you were teaching yourself to be patient in one position for, like, let's say you said 2 years?
Yeah, I would say it was it was sort of helpful for that. I came up with some ways of staying focused, or maybe perhaps unfocused in a sense, or just having a certain state of mind and being able to do it. I was often doing stuff like multiplying number 2, you get 2, 4, blah 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 blah, all the way to millions and stuff, and just keeping your mind busy that way, so something like that, or then focusing on some other stuff. But yeah, I think it has been helpful, because the main thing in that kind of an occupation is patience. You really have to be patient to be able to, you take a pose and you know that you're going to be standing in that one for the next 3 months doing absolutely nothing. So climbing up a mountain, for example, it's not the most interesting thing to do, really. It's pretty boring actually if there's no technical difficulties and you just repeat the same motion all the time. So there's a similarity in that, and I believe it has actually helped me, having been an arts model, nude model, a poser. Yeah.
So that's the most unusual. What about the other jobs? You've done a lot of like TV productions and guiding, and what has been the most joyful job for you, or has there been plenty?
Yeah, there has been a whole lot of interesting things that I've got to do. Writing my book was, of course, took like a couple of years to get it done, and that was a really good learning process. And it's, yeah, creating a thing like that, it's not exactly fun all the time. It's pretty tough. I mean, I think we came up with a pretty good product in the end, and it wasn't always easy, but it was joyful as well. Yeah, so that's one thing that I really sort of have a high regard for, that I've had this chance of being part of this team that created this book. It's yeah, I'm grateful that for sure. That's sort of a mental thing to do, and I'm a bit more of a physical guy, I think. So things like guiding or instructing people in the outdoors is something that I've always enjoyed a whole lot. And my favorite job is being a husky tour dog sleigh guide. It's a lot of fun. I do it seasonally in Pyhäluosto in Finnish Lapland, mainly during the Christmas season when the thing is at its best. It's the busiest season for that kind of thing. And yeah, it's kind of like an action sport as well, so I enjoy it a whole lot. It's my favorite job. I've also done snowboard guiding, and I really love snowboarding, but these days I have a little bit hard times deciding whether I like snowboarding more than the husky thing. You know, it's the husky thing has something that snowboarding does not have, and it's the animals, and the dogs are pretty amazing creatures. So yeah, I would say that as far as work goes, it's my favorite thing, but it's also in a sense my hobby, and it's up there with snowboarding for me, I would say.
You think you're part of the nature when you're dealing with dogs and you're doing the husky sledge in the woods, I guess.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, the nature thing, of course, the nature is big part of it. Dog, at least or all the dogs, I would suppose. I don't have so much experience about other dogs besides the sleigh dogs, but they are pack animals, and in a sense you have to become a part of the dog pack. You know, the dog does not become human even if some dogs feel pretty humane. But you have to become a dog if you want to have a successful career in that thing, and be able to manage the dogs and handle them and be able to guide it. So it's a really interesting process of sort of trying to just change your own human mindset into an animal mindset, and figure out and understand what's going on in an individual dog, but also in a bigger team, like a sleigh team or the whole pack, what's happening over there. They have their own social order and that sort of thing. I don't think they're really all that different from humans, but there's definitely differences, and it's super interesting, and I think it's probably been one of the most, or if not the most enlightening experience I've had in my life. I've done this since 1996, I think, for about 15 Christmas seasons or so, 2-3 years altogether, and it's been very interesting thing.
What took you to husky dogs?
My older brother and a friend of his, they got into this. They went to wilderness guide school in the beginning of 90s, and then they had their training period in a company, which I also then worked later, some years after. So I ended up going there through my older brother and his friend, and my friend actually later on established his own husky kennel, and I worked over there. It's the same kennel still that I go to, it just has a different owner nowadays.
You mentioned already about snowboarding, and we're going to talk about snowboarding a lot, but you have also a lot of other activities in your life. Can you give me some examples?
Well, I've been climbing, mainly doing a bit of rock climbing since 1990, I think maybe 89, so that's been part of my life for about 30 years now. And it's sort of the flip side of the coin from going down the mountain, which for me is snowboarding. Of course I ski a little bit as well, but not so much. But descending mountains with a board or skis is the other side of the coin. And getting up, climbing up, even if it would be a summer activity where you don't end up riding a snowboard down, it's still the same thing more or less for me. So it's about playing with gravity. Of course, climbing up is fighting against gravity in a sense, whereas going down, gliding down a mountain is it's playing with it. So it's totally different, but still it's the same. It's a gravity sport. I also been training judo. That's sort of the first actual real sport that I got into. I was 13 years old, like an 8th grader when I got into it, and it's been part of my life ever since. Even if I have fairly long periods when I haven't really been going to the dojo, the judo hall or the gym to actually train it, but it has influenced all the sports that I've been doing, and definitely my mindset, my attitude towards everything. Judo it's more than a sport, as they say, it's a way of life as well.
What do you think if you had a chance now, right at this moment, to jump in one of your activities? What would it be?
That would of course depend what kind of resources I would have to have.
If you can pick whatever.
Yeah, I would probably I mean, I do a little bit of surfing as well. Not so much. Like this year I've managed probably 10 days or so. But if I had limitless resources, I would definitely pick surfing. It's sort of a very fundamental thing in a sense. It's also a gravity sport. You play with the gravity, but there's other forces involved. Like the wave itself is a kind of a force of nature, and it's pretty special. The environment is, say, compared to climbing, which for the most part the environment is super static. It doesn't move. Whereas in surfing, the whole thing, like everything around you, there's nothing static. Everything moves. So it's very, very different from all the other sports that I've tried. I've tried skydiving a couple of times, jumped out of an airplane, and found that quite fun and interesting as well. And you sort of would think that that's about as dynamic as surfing gets, but I don't think so. You know, it's the air. It is a component that doesn't really change, and when you're in the ocean or in a place where you actually have waves, it's that the whole thing just moves around you, and it has a very strange effect in your mind, mostly in a positive way, of course. It's kind of an activity that really gives you energy. When you come out of the water, you feel really refreshed and energetic. If everything went well, obviously you can almost, like I've had an experience where I was certain that if I get one more wave in my head, I'm not gonna make it and I will drown and die, and that wasn't so much fun, but still a good experience, of course, because I made it through luckily. But yeah, I would pick surfing.
It feels like the environment is a big part of all the activities and work also. You think you really like it too, that you can kind of sense the environment in different obstacles, different environment, waves, you said. There's air, you said sky, mentioned about skydiving. I think you can actually learn to control your body better when you feel the nature also around it and the environment.
Yeah, well, I mean, we live in space, right? Like, I guess it's unlimited space that we are living in, and I like to travel through the space. Like, of course, we are here down in the earth, but that's still space around us, and it's interesting for me to, in snowboarding, I try to find nice lines down the mountain, and it's kind of like, I consider it as some sort of a space traveling thing, and it's definitely the environment environment actually is maybe a little wrong word, because it's something that you have around you, and I don't kind of look at the thing in that kind of a way, or not, at least not always. It's more like I try to be part of it and not have it around me, if you know what I mean.
You live in Helsinki, but you travel a lot, as you said. How fast it comes to you, the feeling that you kind of need to get out of the city and need to be part of the nature, part of the universe?
I'm pretty content here in Helsinki nowadays. I mean, like, it wasn't that long ago when I still had hard times coming back here. Say, when I was my second home is in northern Norway. I have a nice place over there, and that place is like, it's super quiet. There's no people almost at all. It's a valley which is about 30 kilometers long, and there's like 50 people living over there, so the density of population is not all that high. It's completely different from Helsinki. And spending, say, like 2 months over there and then coming back here was always a big shock. Like, almost couldn't stand it. There's so many things going on around you. It's a big hustle and bustle all over, and it just gets into your nerves. But I've sort of managed to grow over that now, and it's not too bad anymore coming here. But of course, yeah, there's so much stimulus here all the time that unless you sort of start blocking things out, like closing your ears and eyes and other senses, you get overwhelmed pretty easy. And yeah, I think it's at least not for me, for my mental health. I wouldn't be able to stay here all year round, right? But I can easily stand and actually enjoy the place for like 2-3 months, maybe 4 months at a go, and then I kind of need to get away a bit, or it's good for me to get away. But yeah, previously, as I said, I used to travel down to the Alps, like spend whole winters over there and stay away for longer periods of time. But now my way has changed a little bit, and I'm usually not away from Helsinki more than say 3-4 weeks at a time. Now that I go to Lapland to work with the Huskies, I'm going to be over there like a month and a half. But that's sort of the maximum for me these days, and that's because I have a daughter here and I have to be a father to her, and I have a chance to be a father to her and take care of her and help her grow up, so I don't want to be away for too long. Yeah, she's coming up to Lapland as well now, just after Christmas, so we're not gonna be separated for too long, but yeah, about a month, and then I need to see her. So yeah, I come back and go a bit more frequently than I used to before when I was younger and not a father yet.
I'm still interested a little bit about the way of living, the nomad way of living. It doesn't demand a lot of stuff when you just travel, right? Of course, you need your equipment to go climbing and riding, but other than that, you can actually survive with a small amount of gear in your life. Am I right?
Yeah, well, I have a whole bunch of all kinds of stuff, like yeah, the playthings that I have, like a pretty big pile of snowboards. I probably have more than 20. I haven't really counted them, maybe more than 30 of those. Some are quite old, and I just have them as a sort of a memorabilia or something, or because they are nice old snowboards. So yeah, it's a pretty big pile of stuff. Then I have a couple of surfboards and a whole bunch of climbing gear and yeah, whatever, all sorts of playthings. But apart from that, yeah, I do actually have a TV, but it's not connected to anything. It's just sitting there in the corner, and I'm sort of thinking of getting rid of it. Yeah, and I have a car. I've had it for like 3 years now. It's basically the first car that I own myself. So, but yeah, I don't have so much clothing, and I was never too keen on like trying to get too much stuff. All the essential things, apart from, yeah, if I can put my snowboarding gear, I can put it basically almost all of it into a single snowboard bag, pick up a board or two, and that's good enough. I mean, I don't really need all those boards that I have. Isn't they nice things to have? Because they're a bit different from each other, but I don't really need them. I can get by with 1 or 2 boards, a pair of boots, goggles and clothing, and I can put them in a single board bag, and then I can have a duffel bag where I put everything else. So that's about the amount of stuff that I can get by with. Yeah, so it's not all that much.
What about you as a person? You like to meet people a lot, or you like to stay by yourself?
Both, definitely both. I like to have my own peace, and I often have periods when I don't have any sort of an urge to meet other people. I can kind of be by myself for fairly long times, like a couple of days, and then I like social life as well, and I really like making new friends and meeting new people, and yeah, it's part of what the space traveling thing, seeing what's in there, and obviously the people are the most interesting things. They're the most complicated and most complex. And for example, I really like mountains, right? But the mountains, they don't do anything. They're just there, and people do all kinds of stuff. It's the same with the dogs. They do all kinds of funny stuff, and so it's interesting to see. Same as with the dogs and human beings, they have their different personalities, and it's enlightening and interesting. It's fun often. Of course, it has downsides too, because not all the people are always nice, but that's part of life as well. And yeah, so yeah, I like both, being by myself. Now that I go to Lapland to work with the Huskies, my days will be such that I go to work in the morning. I meet heaps of people. We can have like 500 guests a day. My work team, or the team that I'm part of, is like 10 people or so. So it's a social thing. Then you of course have 200 dogs. So there's like a lot of different types of persons over there. I consider the dogs persons really, or they have their own personalities. So I think they are persons. So yeah, like it's a social environment. But when I go to the place where I stay, it's in the middle of the trees and there's nobody else there. So half of the day I'm completely alone in the dark, of course, because it's dark over there this time of the year. So yeah, and that's kind of a pretty good picture of how I like it. Yeah, my own peace and social life. I think it's probably most people are like that to some extent, at least. Some like to be more with other people and spend less time on their own, and some others go live as hermits in a cave for 10 years. That's pretty extreme, but eventually they come out of there as well and meet other people. So yeah.
Good balance between.
Yeah, it's about a balance.
Okay, let's jump into the snowboarding, because
Yeah.
that is one of your big things. What was your first kick? How did you end up being a snowboarder?
Actually, yeah, as I said, if I could choose now any sport, I would be a surfer, and that's the thing that I originally wanted to do. I saw a commercial on TV, like back in the 80s. We didn't really have an internet yet, and the way you got to know about stuff was either TV or newspapers. And I saw a commercial. I don't remember if it was a juicy fruit gum commercial or whatever, but it was a commercial. Maybe it was a travel agency commercial or something, and there was an image of this surfer in the ocean. It's like, wow, that looks so much fun. That looks unreal. I was like, I want to do that. And obviously I was living in Hollola next to Lahti, and that's not so well known about the surfing possibilities over there. So I couldn't, and I was like 16 or 17, and didn't really have that much money in my pockets, of course, so I couldn't figure out a way how to get into surfing. And then we read, me and a friend of mine who also wanted to be a surfer, we read an article about snowboarding in Skimbaja magazine. It's like, yeah, well, that looks like the exact same thing except on snow. And then we just decided that, okay, we'll start doing this instead and build our own snowboards. We got a old little Burton catalog somehow, and I don't remember how we got it, but we anyways got it. I mean, nobody was selling snowboards back then yet, anywhere. And we still got the catalog, and it's like, okay, the thing looks like that, then okay, we'll make it. And we just made it out of plywood and started riding all kinds of local little hills. And the first season, this was 87, 88, like 30 years ago now. Yeah, I think I got in almost 100 days of riding in hiking the local little hills in the woods and all sorts of places. Yeah, like every evening after school I would go snowboarding.
Wow. But a lot of questions when people saw you using those boards, like, what are those and what are you guys doing?
But not many people actually saw us. It was just in the woods, and yeah, so there wasn't really much interest about that stuff. Then we found out that like a local sports shop in Lahti started selling boards, and we got to try a real board. And then the next summer, I got a summer job in my friend's company, welding stuff and doing metal work, and saved enough money to be able to buy my first real snowboard.
What was your first board?
Sims Switchblade 1635, I think, was or something. Sims Switchblade, anyways.
Nice. Mine was a Burton Crutcher. I
Okay.
think, yeah, with the tail, the V-tail. I don't know how you call it.
The swallowtail.
Yeah, swallowtail.
Yes,
A bit heavier than nowadays, those boards. but,
Yeah, well, techniques have improved definitely. The technology is unreal nowadays. There's sort of a nostalgia in snowboarding. People tend to think that things were better back then. I don't think so. Like the bindings and the boots were crap and yeah, well, the board designs, actually the shapes were, they're still current. You know, you can still ride boards that are shaped the same way as they were back then. So of course there has been improvements in that department as well, but the way the boards are made, the way boots, especially boots and bindings are nowadays, they're so much better. You can't really say that things were better back then. I mean, they were not worse, of course. It was just as much fun, but as far as gear goes and as far as the level of the sport goes, it definitely has gone through the roof.
The shape has gone a bit the same way than it was back in the days, right?
Yeah, well,
Like the shape of the boards, at least for free riding.
Free riding, and especially the powder boards, the boards that are used in riding soft snow, they kind of gone full circle in a sense. The shapes that were used in the end of 70s, even early 80s, have sort of made comeback. There was a period in the from some time, I think it started early 90s, and it went on for like 10-15 years when not many companies were sort of paying any kind of attention to those kind of the powder boards, the funny shapes, so to speak. But they've made a big time comeback now over the course of past 6 to 8 years or so, maybe 10 years. And that's really good. It's good for the sport, and it's good for the people who are in the sport. So it's great that this has happened. I think I always thought that it's a little short-sighted from the industry to sort of concentrate on the twin-dip freestyle board. There's good reasons for that, but I think it was a mistake.
Have you tried those snow surfboards without bindings?
Yeah, I have 2-3 of those, and yeah, it's a great sport. I started with a snowboard. It's just basically just a snowboard with this pad on it without no bindings, but it's not a specifically made for snow surfing. It's just a snowboard with no bindings, snowboard.
Okay.
The same thing still, but I started riding those like I think it's pretty much 10 years ago or so, and now I got my first own actual snow surfboards or power surfboards last year from friends who make them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really good fun. I think it's about as much fun as it can get, you know, in riding on snow. I think it's better than riding with bindings. Bit more difficult to become good at it. Like doing tricks is totally beyond me. I can just cruise down the hill and do turns and maybe jump off a small little rock, and that's it. But as a feeling, it doesn't get any better.
Seems like you're a pioneer of that also. You said like 10 years ago you had already your no board, and
well, you know,
now they are coming in a big way in the stores.
Yeah, well, maybe in Finland, but not really in any other sense. It's this snowboarding thing had been going on for quite a while when I got into it. There's been guys in Canada and California and those places who'd been into it for much longer. But I would guess in Finland there was not that many guys who were doing it before I got into it. Not that it would be any kind of a mainstream thing still, but there's like a quite a few guys doing it nowadays. Obviously in southern Finland it's a little difficult because we don't have so much snow here. But up in Lapland there's like a bunch of dudes who are really keen on it, and I think the numbers are going to increase. Not that it would become a mainstream sport in the same sense as snowboarding is. I don't think so.
You are a free rider, right? You ride all kind of surfaces, I understood, but free riding is your thing. Was it the start already when you were climbing yourself with your buddy and you had your own board? Was that already the start that this is the thing that you wanted to be a surfer and you want to surf on
Surf the
snow?
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. I mean, like the first run I did on a snowboard, I hiked up the hill and it was natural snow. So even if that is not all of free riding. I mean, when I go to Messila, my home resort, where I got into riding hard-packed snow, it's not any different for me. I'm still free riding over there, even if it's on the piste. It's the same old thing. It's just a little bit different environment. But yeah, I've always been a free rider. I mean, I've done a bit of freestyling as well. And I don't really think that freestyling and free riding are two different things. It's just the approach into how you make your run is a little bit different. And freestylers, obviously, they concentrate on making the trick. I do a little bit of tricks as well, not so much. And in free riding, if you sort of think that pure free riding would be making turns and riding down a line, you can do all sorts of maneuvers as well, like surfers do on a wave. They do cutbacks and snaps and slashes and whatnot, and you can do all those kinds of things on snow as well, on right places, slashes and things. So yeah, but free riding for me is the term. I think snowboarding is all about free riding, even if you're doing, it's a free ride sport. It's a free sport. Yeah.
Can you describe the feeling when you are actually off piste and you have a pure line and nobody's been riding it and you ride down? What is the feeling like?
No, I can't. It changes from day to day, and just like anybody else, I'm sometimes happy and sometimes sad and sometimes in a good mood and sometimes in a bad mood. So that goes for snowboarding as well. And the thing for me is that I don't really expect to have certain kind of a feeling or any kind of a feeling when I go out riding. I just go out riding. It's a thing that I do. It's sort of my practice, you could say. I'm not really religious or spiritual even. My worldview is materialistic and physicalist. I'm an atheist, but I've been studying or reading a little bit books about all sorts of religions, and Buddhism is definitely sort of my favorite because it's the least religious thing. It's more kind of a philosophy or some kind of way or something. And in Buddhism, or especially in the Japanese version of it, in Zen Buddhism, the practice they do is zazen, sitting down and meditating. And they don't sort of expect, as I've understood, they don't expect to have an outcome. It's just a thing you do, and snowboarding for me is that kind of a thing. It's a thing I do, and whatever I get out of it is the thing that I get out of it. So I can't really describe any sort of a feeling because there's so many different types of feelings and emotions, physical and mental involved, and it's kind of like a study or something for me about myself and the world.
Do you still remember the first touch on the mountains when you went there first time and you were able to climb it up and come down?
Not really. I mean, I remember the first road trip that I made, went snowboarding elsewhere besides where I was living. I remember the trip, and I have some images. It was so long ago. I remember the first time I got to go abroad snowboarding. I remember the first time I went to the Alps, and I remember some runs and that kind of thing, but not really the very first. No, I don't remember that.
Let's talk about the climbing a little bit. What do you need to consider when you start going up to the mountains? What are the main points when you think like, okay, now I just take my board and I climb up there? What do you have to consider?
Of course, you just don't go there and start climbing and think about the stuff right there and then. Going into the mountains, it's risky. There's dangers and hazards. And there's things that can hurt you and kill you, so you want to sort of prepare yourself even before. and you normally should start planning your trips, depending of course what you are going to do. But if you're going, say, into avalanche terrain, you really have to start considering about it and thinking about it and planning it at least like the day before, or in any case before you go, so that you have a good plan. You know what kind of conditions to expect. You know this avalanche forecast or the avalanche bulletin. You know what the avalanche risk is like. You know the weather forecast, what kind of weather you need to expect, and of course depending on where you're going, you may need to bring certain kinds of gear. In some places just take snowshoes and poles and put your board in the back and you just walk up. You don't necessarily even need to bring avalanche search and rescue gear, the beacon and the rope and the shovel. You can leave them back home if you're not going to a place where avalanches happen, so you don't need those and you can just go with a very light pack. But if you go to avalanche terrain, you need to bring all that gear, and of course you have to decide if you're going to bring it. Most often, if you're in the mountains, you need to bring them. So mostly it's not even a decision that you need to make, it's just a sort of a standard procedure. Then again, if you're not going into avalanche terrain, you need to bother carrying all that stuff and you just leave it back home, and then you decide, okay, no, I'm not gonna be needing this. If it's a little bit steeper, you may need some climbing gear like ice axe or the hiking axe and crampons perhaps. If you go into glaciers, you need gear for traveling in the glacier, ropes and climbing gear. So there's a lot of things that you sort of need to plan for and decide even before you start the trip. And then when you go on a trip, you start hiking up the mountain, you of course need to pay attention to what's going on around you so you don't get lost from your route. You know where you are, you have to pay attention to your surroundings, what's going on with the snow, with the wind, you know, basically the whole thing around you. You need to be aware of it as good as you can. And then you need to be aware about yourself as well, like what kind of mindset you have, how you feel, if you're getting tired or whatever happens in your body or in your mind. Yeah, so it's there's a lot of things that you really need to consider and pay attention to and focus, and I think it's a difficult game to play, to be in the mountains in risky terrain, because you need to be able to focus, and then you also need to be able to unfocus and have a broader view about stuff, because if you really just focused all the time, you miss the big picture. And I think it's mostly about the big picture, but also about the details. So it's a difficult sport in that respect. Yeah.
Has there been situations that you needed to stop climbing, or you felt like you're physically out of shape, or you didn't feel good, or maybe the conditions went so bad that you just needed to stop climbing and think about this is enough and now just go down?
Yeah, well, yeah, like a lot of times, like now, especially now that I'm a little bit older and I've had multiple sport injuries in my body, I really feel my body all the time. Have a bit of difficulties with it. More like my lower back is often hurting, and I've turned back because of back pain, and I've turned back just because of not feeling generally good without even realizing what really is the reason for it. And yeah, I failed a lot of times. So yeah, but I've been also fighting with those things and trying to be stubborn and keep going. Yeah, but I think it's the sort of a good attitude in this kind of a sport is that, yeah, walking up the hill, every step is a decision, you know, and because with each step you enter new terrain. Even if it's a very short distance, you still enter new terrain, and that terrain with a single step it can be completely different from the previous step. Especially riding down, which is much faster. Every turn or movement takes you further in the terrain that you are traveling through, and it's about constant change. You know, the thing doesn't stay the same. There's a difference all the time coming up, and you sort of have to try to be aware of it, what's going on, and whether you need to stop or take a different line or climb back up or go back down. Yeah, it's about constant decision making.
What about with groups? You've been climbing up with groups, and when the situation goes like you've been guiding people that now this is enough, we can't go further, what are their impressions that they want to go up and they are so pumped? Can they realize it that you have to actually listen to your guts? What is the best thing to do?
Well, usually when I'm leading groups, I try to keep a really huge marginal. You know, like I don't want to go anywhere near, or not anywhere, maybe maybe near, but not too close to anybody's limits, like physical or mental limits. Because a lot of people don't know what their limits are. Because most people these days, they don't really have to find out, you know. So most people don't know what they are capable of doing. And with a bit of instructions, they often are able to do much more than they were thinking themselves that they can do. And it's pretty fun thing to see when people sort of don't go over their limit, but start realizing that their limit is much further than they thought. But I don't want to go to the limit. That wouldn't be a good thing to do in that kind of a situation with people who maybe are not haven't fully realized their own capabilities or their skills and their physical abilities. So I try to stay away from the limit and keep a good marginal, and that sometimes means that we make a decision that we're not going any further. Okay, this is good enough for us, and maybe go find something else instead. So yeah, but when I'm on my own or going out with my friends, it's maybe a little different.
How unpredictable is the weather up there when you go really high?
You know, when you go into the high altitude, the highest I've been is not all that high. I've just been slightly above 6,000 meters, which is obviously pretty high for a person who comes from Etelä-Pohjanmaa. Yeah, like the flattest place on earth, basically, like sea level. So yeah, going up to 6,000 meters is pretty high. But I wouldn't say that the weather is so unpredictable, because you know we have a pretty good systems for making weather forecasts nowadays, and those things, they are available all over the world with the phone now. So it's pretty predictable. So you can predict quite well. And the snow, of course, the snow safety thing, it's a little different, because you're always dealing with a particular place, and the people who make the avalanche bulletins, the forecast for avalanche conditions, most likely haven't been to that place. So it's always about finding out, and yeah, you can of course predict, but whether your prediction is right or wrong or accurate enough, or if it's inaccurate, that's always a good question, and then it's about finding out.
You give lectures also, and you're teaching people about that snow safety.
Yeah.
So I guess it's very important, even though you have those forecasts, and like you said that maybe there's a risk of avalanche or whatever, but they haven't been there, so it's very easy. Find the right words. You have to know the snow conditions yourself, so you kind of need to maybe dig the snow a little bit, or how does it go?
Digging is one thing, but if you're getting into this stuff, it's good to realize that when you make a pit, you know, like you dig a pit in the snow, the information you get from that pit is good only right there, really. You can't make, you know, like if it's on this side of the mountain, you dig that pit on the other side of the mountain, the conditions are different, right? So the information you get from this side of the mountain doesn't necessarily they don't necessarily be valid on the other side at all, because it's different over there. So digging snow pits it's a good way to get to snow, and it's a good way to gather information as well. But it's what you can know from a single pit, it's very limited. You have to sort of have, as I said earlier, you need to be aware of the bigger picture, and it's quite complicated, because it has to do with the weather science, like what does the sun do, what does the wind do, what does the air temperature do, what does the temperature gradient in the snow do, the difference of temperatures between two spots, and yeah, how the snow is. It's pretty complicated. Snow is it's complicated material, but there's easy ways to. You don't really need to get into all that stuff to be able to have a free riding as your hobby in a safe manner, going to places, because there's like all kinds of nice sets of rules that if you follow, you'll be, you could say, almost perfectly safe. Yeah, all you need to know is the avalanche bulletin, what the level of the risk is, and then you adjust your behavior to that. There's like a bunch of different ways of doing it, and systems that people, mountain guides and snow scientists have developed. So you don't really need to get into all the snow science and the deeper things in the avalanche safety thing at all to be able to have a good time.
Okay. You said already that you've been over 6,000 meters and you've broken some records, at least in Finland. Can you tell me about those records? One is involved within that 6,000 meters.
Yeah,
also.
well, I don't really consider it as a record.
Yeah.
I think, I'm not absolutely sure, maybe there was somebody who snowboarded from above 6,000 meters before me, but I'm not aware of that, like a Finnish person. So I think I believe I was the first Finn to snowboard down from Mont Blanc, the highest mountain in the Alps, Mount Elbrus, the highest mountain in Europe, in Caucasus Mountains, and then also Mount McKinley, or the official name nowadays is Denali, the great one. That was, it was like almost 20 years ago as well. I don't really see those as any sort of records. There was guys who went there before me and snowboarders and skiers, and I just followed other people basically. So you can't say that it's a record. Maybe it's a national record of some sort, but those I don't think are so interesting anyways.
Yeah. Experiences maybe.
Yeah, experiences. You asked me in the pre-thing. You asked me about the achievements, and I guess I would say that it's an achievement that I have snowboarded down from the top of Denali, like a 6,194 meter peak. It was a lot of work, so yeah, maybe it's an achievement, but experience is a better word, I think.
What is on your mind when you drop down? You have certain methods that you stay focused and you concentrate before you start riding.
I don't really have like some people, for example in ice hockey, people when they are getting ready for the game, they have certain ways of tying their skates and all the stuff they always do and that kind of thing. I don't really have that kind of stuff. I think probably the most sort of important way of trying to create a good mindset for myself is if I'm hiking up the hill, like on the uphill part of the trip, I try to move in specific ways and try to maintain like as broad an awareness of myself and the environment, the terrain that I'm traveling through, and through that I also try to create then sort of a clear mind for myself for the descent. It's not like it would work every time, because like for example going up in a group, it doesn't always end up being sort of a meditative thing to do. It ends up being more of a social thing, like chatting away and concentrating on the other person more than you perhaps should, and how he feels or what he's saying or how's she doing or whatever, and then you sort of get the human connection interfering the mindset that would probably be better especially from the safety point of view. Yeah, the social thing involved in the group dynamics is a well-known risk in avalanche business. Yeah, it has been pretty thoroughly studied. There's things like mixed groups that have boys and girls. The risk is higher. It's a sexual thing, yeah, there's all kinds of things. But yeah, I try to maintain sort of a clear awareness, clear consciousness, and for that, especially on the uphill bit helps me achieve that. It's easier to manage the risk when you're going up the hill, because that's a slow process, right? You can't really go all that fast. But when you're riding down the hill, you can reach pretty high speeds, and it's technically more demanding to stay upright when you're going down 50 kilometers an hour in complicated terrain. And in that kind of a situation, of course, you have to pay focus on the route and on your line and think about that stuff. But at the same time, you still should be able to know about what's going on with the snow and where the risky places for snow might be, and feel the snow also. What's it doing underneath your feet? And yeah, but it's a bit difficult.
How can you read the line from down below? Because when you go up there and you see the snow and the line you start to ride, it looks totally different. Because
Yeah.
I've seen it. How is it possible to read it from down below and then you know where to go?
Well, I would say that I'm, or at least used to be when I was sort of a bit more active with my snowboarding, basically doing it all the time. I really got into the line planning from below, or from a photograph, or from across the valley from the opposite wall, or any other place than they start riding when I was doing freeride competitions. Because there you don't really get to train the line, you just have to go there and do it on site. So I had to come up with ways of remembering, figuring out how it might be, and yeah, it's just about studying the line, figuring out landmarks, for example, like big rocks or certain features that you can then see when you're going down the hill, or see from the start of your run, and kind of make a mental map of the thing and try to flip it upside down and imagine it from other perspective, or maybe even several perspectives, so that it's so that you have it in your head, so that when you're riding down the thing, you don't really need to think about it that much. You just sort of execute the thing that you planned. Yeah,
Do you think it's important to have those basic skills, like the basic turn, before you go up in the mountains, that you can actually practice here in the smaller slopes also?
Yeah, well, I think that the learning how to snowboard would be easiest with the board without the bindings in soft snow on the right place. It gives you certain freedom to adjust your body, whereas when you have your feet attached to the board with the bindings, you're stuck there, right? And for most people, it's not natural feeling to be stuck on something like that. It's like being tied or something, and it makes things difficult. So it would be easiest to learn on like easy angled, nice, not too difficult place like open field with nice snow and a snow surfboard. But so you could go straight into it. But of course, for most people, especially here in Finland, you don't really have those kind of places where you could train free riding. So going on a local hill, taking the lift up, having a snowboard instructor tell you what to do, and once you have the basic turn, you can turn toe side and heel side, left and right. Once you have that skill and are sort of pretty fluent, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't go try out like natural snow. I studied on natural snow, and my first couple of runs, of course, they were a little difficult, but it didn't take that long for me to be able to make full runs, small ones, but in any case, like a couple of turns, and yeah, so you can basically start this straight off the bat, but things are easier when you have a lift.
Nowadays it's easier for many people to go up into the Alps and fly from here. It's not so expensive anymore, and people have pretty decent jobs in Finland. But also a lot of people now go off-piste without any knowledge. What are the biggest risks to go off the slope?
Well, a normal sports injury is, I think, by far the biggest risk. You wipe out, you fall and twist your knee, or snowboarders typically hurt their wrists and elbows when they put their hand down first when they fall. So falling or hitting something, like riding into a tree, those are the most typical injuries, like I think by far.
What about
Most people don't end up in avalanches, right? It doesn't really happen all too often. It's not that big of a risk. But obviously, if you do end up in an avalanche, you can get really badly hurt or get killed, and there's a pretty high chance for that. Most people who do end up in avalanches actually survive and nothing happens to them, but the risk is like 1 out of 10 also ends up being injured or killed. So it's a high risk, I think. So going into avalanche terrain, you should have some basic knowledge and have some means of making good decisions, and basically being able to manage the risk that you take, like mitigate the risk and be able to live with it without ending up wrecked underneath 3 feet of snow.
Do you think that people don't really recognize that it is so dangerous out there because we live here? Let's say if I travel from Finland or from another country that you're not used to be up in the mountains, and from up there occasionally it doesn't look bad at all, and maybe I've been up in the Alps, I take a ski lift and then I suddenly see, okay, there's a 500-meter drop, and from up there it doesn't look like anything.
Well, there's two different things here that you kind of play with. One is knowledge and the other is understanding, right? And the understanding requires the experience of the thing that you know about. So I think most people do know about the risks, but they don't really understand what it means. I didn't, even if I knew, like when I was younger, I knew that avalanches happen, I knew that people get killed, I knew it was dangerous, but I didn't really understand it before my friends started dying. I ended up in avalanches myself, and that kind of, you could say, brought me to my wits about the whole thing. I'm kind of a bit of a bonehead, you know, things don't necessarily sink into my head too quick, so it actually took quite a bit of time, and I still occasionally sort of forget about it, I could say. It's not that long ago when me and my friends almost died in a really big avalanche in a nice place, but yeah, like some years. So it's a difficult game. I think people know about the risks, but they just don't understand them, and then they don't know how to deal with them either. So it's about having the experience, or better not, of course, to have an experience about avalanche accident, but becoming aware of it at some level, and then having the ability to deal with it. Yeah, it takes time, and you really need to focus on the thing. In this kind of a sport that actually have environmental or natural risks, hazards, most people often concentrate on the physical ability, on the skills that you have, and your condition. They train to be fit and strong, and they train to know all kinds of maneuvers, having the ability to turn in different types of snow and that. But those skills don't mean anything when it comes to the risk management, right? So that's like a whole nother set of skills that you need to learn, and you only learn those if you start studying it. So I would suppose that most people don't realize how much effort they really should put into that half of the sport. Yeah.
You said you've been the avalanches several times, I guess. So you've been buried, I guess, also.
No, I've been lucky in that sense. I've never been buried on the snow. I've been in a fairly big avalanche once, and I would say pretty big avalanche like a couple of times. I haven't even been in a situation where I would have had to dig somebody else out. But I've had several avalanche incidents. Nobody, luckily, excuse me, one guy has actually died. I didn't need to dig him up, I found him. It wasn't somebody that I knew really, but yeah, I've been in that kind of a situation. No, I haven't been under the snow myself. I'm really, really happy about that. some friends have, and from the reports I got from them, it wasn't all that pleasant, you know.
I believe so. What about after that you've been to avalanche and you said that you already saw one guy got killed? How difficult it is to get back into mountains? Do you think about it at all?
Yeah, well, when this guy died, for sure I had a, what's it called, post-traumatic stress disorder for quite a while. Obviously, it's horrendous to see another person die. So, but I got back into the thing like fairly soon, like after a couple of days. Yeah, the thing, yeah, it for sure still influences me. So it's not like it would be going anywhere. It's all in your head for the rest of your life.
Is now that when you go up there that you said you still have some situations that you maybe were not supposed to be in? Is it more like you accept it now that it can happen and it's part of the whole sport?
Yeah, it's part of the sport for sure. Like, it's obviously part of the sport. The avalanches do happen and people do die in avalanches. It's a fact. So it's kind of like in ice hockey. I kind of like ice hockey in the ticket. Sometimes watch a match. People say that the violence is not part of the ice hockey, right? And still those guys fight over there. So you can't really say that it wouldn't be. If you say that it's not part of part of ice hockey, you don't accept ice hockey as it is, right? And in this sport, it's definitely part of the thing. You know, people get killed, so you kind of have to accept it. If you're not accepting it, you are in denial, and if you are in denial, you don't have the whole picture in your head, and you're bound to get into troubles for sure.
So this has to be the ideology of, because you said you lost some friends also.
Yeah, like 20 or 30 or so, like a whole lot of people that I've known. Not all of them have died in avalanches or fallen into crevasses. Some like base jumpers and that kind of people as well, but generally in these extreme sports, the action sports, whatever you call them, they're pretty high risk, and yeah, people get killed, and that's that. Yeah, there's of course there is ways of mitigating the risk and reducing it, but it's not like it would be going away. You know, humans make mistakes and errors happen, and nobody is perfect. So you kind of like just have to accept it. First accept it, and then do your best to avoid it.
You have a daughter now.
Mm.
Did it change the way of your thinking at all when you got your child?
Well, not instantly. It's not, so hardly anything that happens to humans is something that would change them instantly from something to something else. So it's been a gradual process, but sure, it has changed the outlook of my life and my attitude towards the stuff that I do, for sure, yes.
Is she a free rider also nowadays?
She's snowboarding. Started out skiing, cross-country skiing first. Taught her how to cross-country ski a little bit. She wasn't too keen, didn't like it so much. Then pretty much at the same time started doing alpine skiing. And then the next season I bought her a snowboard as a Christmas gift, and got into that a little bit, like, what was it, like 3-4 years ago or something. And we do that. I mean, yeah, we do it together. It's our hobby. It's not my hobby. She likes it, seems to like it, and she's really looking forward to the winter. We've done all kinds of stuff. She got into the hiking thing, not last winter, but the winter before. She did her first little hikes, like 300 vertical meters up to the tree line, and nice easy terrain. And we've done some summer hikes as well before, so it's kind of natural. Like I think she was like 10 years old when we walked up the first mountain, almost 1,000 vertical meters, and she's been on a glacier in summer, so we do a bit of nature things like hiking and stuff, and snowboarding is a pretty natural extension to that. So yeah, last winter she climbed up her first peak in the winter time. I carried her snowboard, so because it's pretty heavy stuff to do, and she's only 12, so help her out a bit. I think if she has a chance to come to say Norway this winter, I'm not going to be carrying her board anymore. She has to do it herself. Yeah. So yeah, we do stuff together.
Yeah. Sounds good. It's following her dad's footsteps.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's about following my footsteps. It's about yeah. I mean, I don't care if she keeps on snowboarding for the rest of her life. That would be fun, of course, because I will. And spending time with my kid with an activity that I really enjoy myself, and I think she enjoys it as well, would be great. But if she decides to start doing something else, it's fine with me. You know, it's not like I would force her. I am a snowboard daddy, but I'm not a snowboarding daddy in the sense that I would want this sport to be some sort of a career for her or anything. It's a free thing, you know. If she finds something else instead, I'll be happy for her and support her doing that.
Let's travel a little bit back in the conversation. You already said that you had a great experience writing your book. What made you do that decision, got into writing?
Well, I'm a co-author of that book. There was two writers. Matti is a retired medical doctor. He's like 70 years old now. He got into snowboarding when he was 50 years, so he's kind of like came into it quite late. I mean, he's already been snowboarding for 20 years, so that's quite a while, but in any case, he was like he was older than I am now. I'm 47, and he was like 50 when he got into it, so yeah, what he didn't really know anything about snowboarding, what it is. He just figured out, okay, pretty much kind of like myself, yeah, like looks cool, maybe it can be done on natural snow. The image he had from snowboarding was the competition thing, you know, the slope style and the piste riding and all that, and then he just figured that maybe it can be done in some another way as well. He didn't watch any movies or anything, so he wasn't really aware of backcountry snowboarding, which has existed as long as the sport has existed. But he figured himself that, okay, it might be cool, and then he got into it, and immediately he started doing these trips into the backcountry, like tunturisusi style, if you know what that means, like Suomen Latu, the old school association for going to wilderness, and he was into that kind of a thing, and he did these really cool trips where they went far out into the Finnish backcountry and built igloos and stuff, stayed there and did backcountry snowboarding. And of course he figured out that he's a smart guy. He figured out that there's risks and he has to know about those, and especially the avalanches, and then he started studying the thing a little bit, finding articles and translating those into Finnish, and then he ended up having like a pretty big pile of those. And he thought that maybe this could be a book of some sort. And then he contacted me, and I thought that, yeah, that's a good idea. And we started slowly working on it. That's how I got into this thing. So it's Matti's initiative, and he asked me to join it, basically.
You've really been involved in many different things, and now you also have something going on in Norway, in Tamok. Right?
Yeah. I met this Norwegian dude, my really good friend Åtne Olsrud in Kilpisjärvi the first time. I was hanging out in Kilpisjärvi that time, and we half randomly hooked up, and he's a landowner there in a place, the place where I go to. I've been going to every spring for about 10 years now, and it's Tamokdalen, Tamok Valley. It's a desolate place, not so many people living anymore. There actually was still like 150 community of people, about 150 people living there like 3-4 decades ago. And now it used to be an agricultural place, and since the society at large has been changing quite a bit, that it has an effect on that place as well, and now there's only like 50 people living there, and mostly like not young people. So Odne was sort of concerned about the place where his home, how it could stay alive, and he figured that tourism might be the way, and that maybe there's good resources for winter tourism. He was into alpine climbing and telemark skiing and randonnee skiing, the ski touring thing, and thought that maybe this could be something that could be done over here. And then I hooked up with him, and we made a bit of research work and started this project, and we're trying to establish a little ski resort over there on his land. And we managed to get part of his land re-regulated from agricultural land into tourism land like 5-6 years ago, and since then we've been working on a regulation plan, like actual capping plots and how the pists are on the map and lift lines and that sort of thing, like designing a little ski resort. And we put in our application for the regulation plan to the municipality authorities beginning of this year, and hopefully we get a decision now during the next month or two or so. It's looking pretty good.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. When we got into this, you could say that we didn't really know shit about this stuff, like how to make it happen, how to design a place. And now I think we have quite a bit of knowledge. We studied all sorts of things like city planning. We have a city planner or area planner in our group. Who's a snowboarder as well. We have a really good architect in our team, and I've learned heaps of things, all kinds of things. I used to do a bit of marketing work and communication, PR and communication, and that sort of work even before. But I would say that I don't know if my skills really are any better than they used to be, but at least my knowledge and understanding about that subject has increased like tenfold at least. So yeah, it's been a great learning experience, and I think if we do actually manage to really create the place, we will have a nice little place.
Good place to stay at.
Yeah.
It's been just great to hear your story and hear all the things around off-piste snowboarding, and the whole background of your experience it's huge. When you think about and speak about the free riding and the whole scene and all other things, the experience in life, it's been just great. I have a couple of more questions for you.
Sure.
How you see yourself in, let's say, 15 years from now?
I kind of hope that I'm doing the same thing still. Like I don't know if I'm gonna go back to Pyhäluosto to the Arctic Husky farm to guiding during the Christmas season for that many times, but I do hope definitely that I still have some kind of a chance to work with the dogs and guide people in that sport or in that activity. And definitely I will intend on keeping on snowboarding and doing all the different activities that I do, train a bit of judo and that sort of thing. I mean, if I compare myself to what I was 15 years ago, I definitely think there has been some changes or developments or some kind of an evolution, and I hope that this kind of a thing continues, where it leads me to, and what, for example, my worldviews might be. Of course, I can't have a clue before I get there, so. But definitely I plan on staying on my path and not get off it if I really don't have to. Yeah.
When you wake up in the morning, what is the thing that gives you a smile on your face?
Well, I'm grumpy in the mornings. Yeah. Lately I've been in a good mood, but as I said, I have quite a few sports injuries, and it tends to take me a bit of time to sort of warm up and get in a better mood. I really have to take my time getting out of the bed and that sort of thing. But it depends a little bit where I am. If I'm, say, working like now, I'll be working in like 12 days with the dogs I don't stand up like I don't shoot out of the bed like a rocket exactly. It still takes time, but yeah, I know that I have a most likely a very nice day ahead of me. So that already gives me like a nice positive mood, and I look forward to the thing. Then if I don't have anything in my calendar, which has been the case for the past couple of weeks, I've been kind of like charging my batteries. I don't really care, you know, if I smile or not. I know I will eventually smile. I can really put the smile on my face. I learned this great wisdom from this what's his name? Thich Nhat Hanh, something like that, like a Buddhist monk who said that sometimes your joy is the source of your smile, but sometimes your smile is the source of your joy. So by smiling, you can make yourself feel a little bit better. I don't necessarily remember the thing first thing in the morning, but eventually most days I do, and I try to smile, even if I wasn't in a good mood, because it puts me in, it's like this sort of a physical mental loop that you put over there, and smiling is a great thing to do. So yeah, if there is no thing that would sort of naturally put that smile on my face, I try to put it myself, and then the world becomes a little bit better place.
Thank you, Jarkko. Thank
Yeah.
you very much for giving me your time here.
No worries, it was fun. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.